Before certain transformations take place, something inside withdraws. There is no announcement, no explanation, no dramatic event to mark the shift. The person simply becomes less available. Conversations feel shorter. Responses arrive slower. The warmth that once came naturally now requires effort that isn't there. Friends notice the change first. Family members ask what happened. Partners feel the distance and assume something broke. But nothing broke. What's happening operates beneath the surface of relationships, beneath the language of connection, beneath the social contract that demands we remain consistently available to those who know us. This is not depression, though it may resemble it. This is not avoidance, though it appears similar. This is the soul withdrawing into itself because the form it has been occupying no longer fits what it is becoming. And before it can emerge in a new shape, it must first retreat from the old one. Most people never understand this process. They interpret the withdrawal as rejection. They take the silence personally. They watch someone they love become unreachable and conclude that love has ended. But love hasn't ended. The system of attachment itself is reorganizing, and the person in transition cannot explain what they don't yet understand themselves. Mary Ainsworth spent decades studying how human beings respond to separation and reunion. Her work on attachment patterns revealed something profound that extends far beyond childhood development. She observed that withdrawal is not always pathological. Sometimes it is adaptive. Sometimes the system recognizes that maintaining proximity would prevent necessary reorganization. In her research, Ainsworth identified patterns where individuals temporarily reduce their attachment behavior, not because the bond was damaged, but because internal conditions required a different form of engagement. The child who stops reaching for comfort is not necessarily insecure. Sometimes they are learning to self-regulate. The adult who steps back from intimacy is not necessarily avoidant. Sometimes they are preparing for a transformation that cannot happen while remaining enmeshed in old relational patterns. Ainsworth understood that attachment serves development, not just connection, and development sometimes requires distance. When the soul begins to recognize that its current form has become constrained, when the patterns of response that once felt natural now feel performative, when the emotional rhythms that used to sustain connection now drain vitality, the attachment system sends a signal. That signal is not alarm. It is instruction. It tells the organism to create space, not because connection is dangerous, but because transformation requires room to unfold. And transformation cannot happen while you are still actively maintaining the architecture of who you used to be. The common interpretation gets it backward. When someone becomes distant, the reflex is to diagnose loss. People say you changed, you became cold, you stopped caring, something happened to you. But the truth is more precise. You did not stop caring. You stopped being able to care in the same way without compromising what is trying to emerge. The distance is not emotional withdrawal, it is structural reorganization. You are not leaving people behind. You are leaving behind a version of yourself that required a certain kind of relational presence to function. That version needed constant validation, or constant caregiving, or constant performance of a role that no longer reflects your internal reality. The soul does not abandon people arbitrarily. It abandons forms that have become prisons. And when it does, those still attached to the old form experience it as abandonment. But from the inside, it feels like survival. It feels like finally allowing yourself to breathe in a way you have been holding back for years. If people around you are asking what changed, the answer is not that you stopped caring. The answer is that continuing to care in the old way would require you to stop becoming. If you are struggling right now to understand why you subscribe to this kind of content, take a moment and ask yourself what transformation you are quietly preparing for that no one around you seems to see. There is a reason you are here. There is a reason certain themes keep pulling your attention. If this resonates, leave a comment below saying the word transition. You do not need to explain it. Just mark that you recognize what is being described. And if you want to keep exploring these patterns, subscribe so you do not lose access to this space. Most platforms will not show you this kind of material unless you actively choose it. These ideas do not circulate in the mainstream. They circulate among people who are already in the process of internal reorganization and need language for what is happening to them. Inside every person there is a system that tracks coherence. It monitors whether your external life matches your internal state. It evaluates whether the roles you occupy still serve your development. It measures the cost of maintaining relationships that depend on you staying the same. When the cost becomes too high, when the effort to remain recognizable to others starts to erode your capacity to recognize yourself, the system makes a decision. It withdraws energy from external engagement and redirects it inward. This is not conscious strategy. It is automatic regulation. The soul does not ask permission. It simply stops participating in patterns that threaten its reorganization. You stop answering texts with the same enthusiasm. You stop showing up to gatherings that once felt important. You stop explaining yourself because explanation requires you to translate an internal process into a language designed for external consumption. And that translation distorts what is actually happening, so you go quiet. Not because you have nothing to say, but because what you are experiencing cannot yet be spoken. It is still forming. It is still being worked out in the silent depths where language does not reach. And the people around you interpret that silence as distance. They are not wrong. You are distant. But distance is not the same as departure. You have not left. You have stepped back to see more clearly. There comes a point in certain internal processes where remaining connected in the usual way becomes impossible. Not difficult. Impossible. Because the self that would need to show up for that connection no longer exists in the form it once did. You cannot be the person people expect you to be while simultaneously becoming someone new. The two processes are incompatible. Maintaining the old relational patterns requires energy that is now being used for transformation. So you make a choice, often without realizing you are making it. You allow relationships to cool. You stop initiating. You stop reciprocating at the same intensity. And people feel abandoned. They feel confused. They feel hurt. But you cannot carry their hurt and complete your own transformation at the same time. One will consume the other. If you prioritize their comfort, you will halt your own development. If you prioritize your development, they will experience loss. There is no version of this where everyone stays satisfied. The soul does not negotiate. It simply withdraws from contexts that prevent its becoming. And it does so without apology. Because apology would imply that the withdrawal is wrong. It is not wrong. It is necessary. It is the only way forward. This process has a name. It is called withdrawal of the soul before assuming a new form. It is not isolation. It is not avoidance. It is not regression. It is preparation. It is the internal system creating conditions for reorganization. You cannot reorganize while fully engaged in maintenance of the old structure. You must first disengage. That disengagement feels like loss to others. To you, it feels like the first breath after years of holding. It feels like permission to stop performing. It feels like finally being able to rest in a way that does not require you to be anything other than what you are becoming. And what you are becoming is not yet clear. You do not have words for it. You do not have a plan. You only have a sense that the old ways no longer work and that something new is trying to emerge. That is enough. You do not need clarity. To honor the process, you only need to allow it. And allowing it means withdrawing from the people and contexts that demand you remain unchanged. Something is being worked out inside you. You may not be able to name it yet. You may not be able to explain it to anyone who asks, but you can feel it. There is a reorganization happening beneath the surface of your daily life. Old boundaries are being redrawn. The way you used to give is being reconsidered. The way you used to receive is being questioned. The roles you played in relationships are being evaluated for whether they still serve your truth. And the answer, increasingly, is that they do not. The forms you have been occupying were built for a version of yourself that no longer exists. That version needed approval. That version needed to be useful. That version needed to prove its worth through relentless availability. But you are no longer that person, and the soul knows this before the mind does. So it begins to withdraw, not from life, but from the particular configurations of life that require the old self to remain operational. It pulls back energy. It reduces output. It stops trying so hard. And in that reduction, space opens. Space for something new to take shape. This is not unique to you. This is an archetypal process. Across cultures, across time, there is a recognized pattern. Before emergence, there is retreat. Before transformation, there is withdrawal. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly while remaining socially engaged. It seals itself away. It dissolves. It reorganizes in the dark. And only after that solitary process completes does it re-enter the world in a new form. Human transformation follows the same pattern. You cannot become who you are meant to be while maintaining all the relationships and roles that were built around who you used to be. Some of those relationships will survive the transformation, some will not. But you cannot know which is which until after the process completes. So you withdraw. You create distance. You allow relationships to rest in ambiguity. And you trust that the ones meant to endure will endure. The ones that cannot will fall away. And both outcomes are correct. There is no failure in this. There is only the natural sorting that occurs when a person stops pretending to be who they were and starts inhabiting who they are becoming. The distance you feel right now is not coldness. It is discernment. It is the soul recognizing that not all proximity serves growth. Some relationships, no matter how loving, keep you locked in old patterns. They expect you to respond in familiar ways. They need you to play a certain role. And as long as you remain available in that role, you cannot fully become something else. So the soul withdraws, not in anger, not in judgment, simply in recognition that the cost of staying is higher than the cost of leaving. And that cost is not measured in conflict or drama. It is measured in the quiet erosion of your internal coherence. It is measured in the increasing gap between who you are and who you present yourself to be. When that gap becomes unbearable, the system shuts down external performance and redirects all resources inward. This is not breakdown. This is conservation. This is the organism protecting the process of transformation by refusing to engage in patterns that would abort it. Silence is not emptiness. It is incubation. When you go quiet, when you stop explaining, when you stop showing up in the ways people expect, you are not disappearing. You are consolidating. You are allowing the fragments of a new self to come together without interference. That process cannot happen in noise. It cannot happen while you are busy managing other people's reactions to your withdrawal. It requires stillness. It requires solitude, not permanent isolation, but temporary removal from the contexts that demand you remain legible to others. In that removal, you become legible to yourself. You begin to hear what your internal system has been trying to tell you. You begin to see the patterns you have been enacting without awareness. You begin to feel the weight of roles you have been carrying that were never yours to carry. And in that seeing, that feeling, that awareness, the new form begins to take shape. Not through effort, not through strategy, but through the simple act of no longer preventing it. The soul knows how to reorganize. It only needs you to stop interfering. You can see this process in small signs. The person who used to respond immediately now takes days. The person who used to initiate has gone silent. The person who used to explain themselves now offers no commentary. These are not signs of disconnection. They are signs of internal focus. The energy that used to go outward is now being used for something else. And that something else is not yet ready to be shared. It is still forming. It is still fragile. It cannot withstand scrutiny or questioning or the demands of people who need you to return to the version of yourself they recognize. So you protect it. You shield it with distance. You give it room to develop without exposure. And in doing so, you appear to others as though you have withdrawn from life. But you have not withdrawn from life. You have withdrawn from a particular performance of life that was costing you your soul. The way you occupy space has changed. You are quieter, more internal, less reactive. People say things and you do not respond with the urgency you once did. You observe more. You participate less. Not because you have lost interest, but because your mode of engagement is shifting. You are no longer trying to fit. You are no longer trying to be understood. You are simply allowing yourself to exist in a state of transition without forcing resolution. This makes people uncomfortable. They want you to explain. They want you to return to normal. They want reassurance that you still care. But you cannot offer that reassurance without lying. You do care, but not in the same way. Not with the same availability. Not with the same willingness to prioritize their comfort over your own transformation. And that shift, that recalibration, is what they feel as distance. It is distance, but it is necessary distance. It is the space required for you to stop being who you were and start becoming who you are. The central truth is simple. The soul withdraws because the old form no longer fits. It is not rejecting connection. It is rejecting confinement. It is not abandoning people. It is abandoning patterns that require self-betrayal to maintain. When you feel this withdrawal happening in yourself, when you notice that you are less available, less engaged, less willing to explain, that is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is reorganizing. Your internal system has recognized that transformation is necessary, and it has initiated the process by pulling energy away from external performance and redirecting it inward. You do not need to fight this. You do not need to force yourself back into connection before you are ready. You only need to allow the process to unfold. Trust that the soul knows what it is doing. Trust that withdrawal is not failure. It is preparation. If you recognize yourself in this description, if you have been feeling this pull to step back, to go quiet, to create distance without fully understanding why, then what you are experiencing makes sense. You are not broken. You are not regressing. You are in transition. And transition requires space. It requires solitude. It requires the courage to disappoint people who expect you to remain the same. You are allowed to withdraw. You are allowed to stop explaining. You are allowed to prioritize your own reorganization over other people's need for consistency. This is not selfishness. This is survival. This is the soul refusing to be locked in a form that no longer serves its becoming. Let people be confused. Let them be concerned. Let them interpret your distance however they need to. You do not owe them a performance of the old self. You only owe yourself the space to discover what comes next. Not every transformation begins with action. Some begin with stillness. Some begin with silence. Some begin with the quiet, unexplained withdrawal of the soul before it assumes a new form. If you are in that space right now, you are not alone. There are others here who understand. Others who have walked through this same passage and emerged different on the other side. This space exists for people in transition, for people who have learned that not all distance is loss, for people who know that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and allow yourself to become. If that is you, leave the word transition in the comments. No explanation needed, just the acknowledgement. And if you want to continue exploring these patterns, subscribe so you do not lose access. These ideas do not circulate widely. They circulate here, among people who are already in the process and need language for what they cannot yet fully name. Claude é uma IA e pode cometer erros. Por favor, verifique as respostas. Sone 4.5